your completed card to a city staff member. You may check the "I do not wish to speak" option on the card. This allows you to still voice your opinion on an item on the record without having to speak. In accordance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, please contact a staff member if you need any assistance. Public comment on a non-agenda item will take place during the citizen comment portion of the evening. These are items that don't appear on tonight's formal agenda. The Commission Secretary will call your name when it's time for you to speak. At that time, please approach the podium and tell us your name for the record. You'll have a maximum of 3 minutes. The timer is on the screens visible from the podium. Note that you may also choose not to speak if other speakers before you have said what you wanted to say. Shouting, cheering, and loud noises will not be tolerated, and violators may be removed for disrupting the meeting. Goodyear Planning and Zoning Commission meetings stream live on YouTube and online at goodyearaz.gov. Follow the city's social media pages so you don't miss out on all that's happening in Goodyear. Thank you for coming to this meeting and being an active part of your city. And remember, it's a great time to be in Goodyear.
Good evening. The Planning and Zoning Commission meeting for June the 28th is called to order. Would you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Secretary, would you note the roll?
Chairman Kish is absent, Vice Chairman Clymer is present, Commissioner Wang is present, Commissioner Hegedus is present and joining us virtually on Teams, Commissioner Booth is present, and Commissioner Sambito is present. We have a quorum.
Okay, first item on the agenda is to approve the draft minutes of the Planning and Zoning Commission meeting of June 14th. Can I have a motion and a second?
And actually, before we do that, if we could do a motion and second to excuse.
Oh, that's right. Our dear
Kish.
chairman is not here. We have to do that. May I have a motion and second to approve the absence of our chairman, Chairman Kish?
I have a motion and a second.
Okay. And y'all vote?
And if I can get a voice vote from Commissioner Hegedus?
Aye.
Thank you. Motion passes.
Okay, now can I have a motion and a second to approve the minutes from the last meeting? Motion by Commissioner Sambito and Commissioner Wang, seconds. All vote.
Commissioner Hegedus?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, now is the time for any citizens who would like to address the commission on non-agenda items. Were there any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Anyone from the public like to make a talk on non-agenda items? Okay, seeing as there are none, this is now an opportunity for any commission members who might have had some ex parte communication on any agenda items for this week's meeting. Anyone?
No.
Nothing. Okay. Okay, I'm going to open the, well, I guess I should ask Commissioner Hickett, did you have any?
I did not.
Did not. Very good. Thank you very much. Open the public hearing. Agenda item number 2 is a special use permit for a mini storage facility. And you don't appear to be who I thought you were going to be, so, oh, you are. Okay, I'm sorry. I had to take my contacts out and readjust them after playing golf today. So, Planner Guadalupe Ortiz Cortez will now present.
Thank you, Vice Chairman Clymer. Guadalupe Ortiz Cortez, Planner. Mr. Chairman, Commission members, The request before you is for a special use permit for a mini storage facility. The subject property is located at the northwest corner of North Litchfield Road and West McDowell Road. The property is shown on the screen by the orange outline. The property is zoned PAD, Planned Area Development, and has an underlying C2 General Commercial designation. The zoning for the property was approved in 1999. The site is approximately 2 acres and is located within the Palm Valley Commerce Park. The property is located south of the Montessori in the Park School, east of the Vistas at Palm Valley neighborhood, north of the Palm Valley Office Park, and west of the Haymaker Restaurant. Customers will have access to the storage facility from existing entrances from Litchfield Road and McDowell Road, as outlined on the slide by the orange arrows. As mentioned, the property has a PAD C2 General Commercial zoning. The permitted uses by right in the C2 zoning district are shown on the slide and include adult bookstores, banks, business offices, funeral homes, hotels, trade schools, retail, restaurants, among other uses. Storage facilities may be considered in any of the commercial districts with a special use permit. The special use permit proposal is for a 3-story mini storage facility. The proposed project provides the required parking spaces and landscape as required. The front of the project is facing east towards the Haymaker Restaurant, and the rear of the property is facing west towards the vistas at Palm Valley. The project provides a rear building setback of 46 feet within its property, including 2 10-foot wide landscape strips. One is right here and the other is right here, and a 26-foot fire lane. In addition, there is a 30-foot wide landscape strip within the vistas at Palm Valley before reaching the residence property line. And I apologize, you can't see this on this slide. But this is the property. There's a 30-foot landscape strip within the vistas at Palm Valley HOA property before reaching the property line to the residence property line. Loading facilities for the mini storage facility are proposed on the northern and southern sides of the building. No uses are proposed to take place in the west side of the building facing the residential neighborhood. The proposed building design matches that of buildings in the surrounding area, including the use of angled roofs and incorporating stone and desert colors in their colors and materials palette, and the applicant also brought with them a colors and materials palettes, if you would like to take a look at it. The west elevation faces the vistas at Palm Valley neighborhood. It does not have any windows. The east elevation that faces the Haymaker Restaurant is this one shown on the screen here. The building has a height of 38 feet to the top of the parapet wall, and at its highest points for the angled roofs, it has a height of 48 feet. The C2 zoning district has a maximum height of 56 feet. The proposed mini storage facility is providing a height of 38 feet to the top of the parapet wall and 48 feet where the pitch roofs are provided to match the design of the residential homes and hotels in the area. The C2 zoning district rear building setback requirement is 0 feet. The proposed project provides a rear building setback of 46 feet that is facing the vistas at Palm Valley neighborhood. The applicant provided this section showing the distance between the residential homes and the proposed mini storage facility. The application meets the special use evaluation criteria established in the zoning ordinance as detailed in the staff report. Staff believes that the special use permit is compatible with the uses permitted in the surrounding area. Storage facilities are typically quiet buffers between residential properties and roads or other commercial uses. The nearest residential neighborhood, as previously mentioned, is adjacent to the proposed mini storage facility. However, there is a total setback of 76 feet from the mini storage building to the residence property line, to the residence property line, which includes a 30-foot landscape strip within the Vistas at Palm Valley HOA property and two 10-foot landscape strips and a 26-foot fire access lane within the subject property. The proposed mini storage facility will have office hours of operation from 8 a.m. until 6 p.m. 7 days a week. Customers will have access to the storage building from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. 7 days a week. Staff does not recommend any restrictions to the hours of operation, given that the property is located within a commercial center and given that all storage use will be contained within the building. A traffic study was submitted and reviewed with the special use permit application. The traffic study found that the proposed development is not anticipated to cause detrimental impacts to the surrounding roadway network. The property is required to comply with the city's Zone 2 lighting standards, which are designed to protect adjacent developments by requiring full cutoff lighting, designed to prevent spillover to residential properties. And in addition, staff is recommending a stipulation that limits lighting on the rear of the property facing the Vistas at Palm Valley neighborhood. Additionally, staff is recommending a stipulation that prohibits lighted signage and lighting 8 foot or higher on the west elevation to further protect the residents. The citizen review and public hearing processes were followed. Notices were mailed to surrounding property owners. A sign was posted on the property, and a legal advertisement was published in the newspaper. A neighborhood meeting was held on May 25th. One resident attended the meeting. The resident expressed support for the project. Staff has not received additional inquiries on the project. I also have a correction to make for the public participation section of the staff report. There was a staff applicant miscommunication. The applicant intended to mail letters to homeowners adjacent to the property. However, they decided not to avoid confusion to avoid confusing the residents with receiving additional mail about the project close to the public hearing dates. The special use permit requirements are met. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission forwards a recommendation of approval to the City Council, subject to the stipulations found in the staff report. Mr. Chairman, Commission members, this concludes my presentation. The applicant and owner representatives are in attendance tonight.
Okay, are there any questions for staff?
I have a couple.
Okay.
Guadalupe, in looking at this, it seems really tall considering that the residential units are adjacent to it. But I also noticed that to the south, fronting McDowell, as well as the Residence Inn, are in good close proximity to the same residential development. Can you give me some perspective? Like, how close is that Residence Inn to the nearest house, as well as how close is that existing office building on the south side there? Is it very similar?
Here's a section. So the section shows that the proposed mini storage is approximately, there's perhaps a 90-foot separation between the actual home, the building of the home, to the mini storage building. I would also like to add that there is a home to suites that was administratively approved. That is a hotel, 4 stories hotel. That is approximately 48, no.
So that one's 4 stories then, the new one?
That is correct.
Okay.
And I do have the height for the home to suites here. The home to suites has a height of 59 feet to the peak, including additional height for parapet.
And how far is that one from the residence?
Approximately
The same?
30 to 50 feet. Yes, that is correct.
My concern is not necessarily the proximity of the buildings, but the proximity in combination with the height. So this is 56 feet, if I recall correctly. It's towering fairly close. When I see the office building to the south, there's a nice big buffer there, a couple stacks of parking, and through both ways, drive aisle. I did notice that the residence inn on the north side, which already is in existence, that's also 3 stories plus your parapet, and it seems close to those new units as well. So I was just trying to help myself get a feeling for what's already there, and I was not aware of the Home 2 suite, so that is close as well. Are the homes occupied? Are the units occupied that are adjacent to the west?
Thank you, Commissioner Zambito. That is correct. The homes are built and occupied.
And we received no, other than one positive feedback, we received no concern from the residents.
That is correct. The residents were noticed for the neighborhood meeting as well as the public hearings.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Would the applicant like to make a presentation?
Well, that's getting pulled up. I think this can come up, right? If I press the right button, if I ask it nicely, will it come up? This button right here, right? The one that has the up arrow? Oh. All right, well, we'll make it. That's not that big of a deal. Perfect, great. For your record, my name is Taylor Earl with the law firm of Earl & Curley. Our address is 3101 North Central Avenue. I might be able to have some information that might be somewhat helpful in kind of understanding maybe why this is, why we're not getting negative community feedback. So as was mentioned, and I want to pause just real quickly on this, this is a challenging parcel because it has C2 zoning within the PAD, but it's recessed from the arterials. So there's a real question as to, well, what's going to go there, right? If I were a resident moving into those homes, that'd be the number one question I'd ask my realtor is, what's that zone for? What's going to go back there? Now, I know average people don't ask zoning questions. I know I'm probably unique in that regard. But if you see the commercial center, I think most people would say, oh, that's a little different than moving in next to a residential community, right? And so then you say, well, what can go on that? And it was just shown all the different uses that can go on that parcel. So there's that, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But also just from a sheer land use perspective, this is a challenging parcel that gets recessed. So you don't have the frontage that nowadays office users are really saying, okay, there's a glut in the market right now for office. There's a lot of available office space. There's a lot of available zoning for it. And it's not that office is dead, but it's that if I'm going to put in an office, I want to be able to have visibility. And so we're finding that parcels that are recessed, they're not going to have the same marketability or desire for those parcels. Obviously for retail, the same thing. We have a glut in the market right now of retail zoning. Retailers really kind of somewhat have their pick of the litter of where they go because everybody wants a retail. Everybody wants their restaurateurs to come to their land. But again, why would you choose a parcel that's recessed versus one that has frontage? And so these have become challenging parcels to develop. This gives a little bit more perspective, I think, on the question that was being asked. Obviously, it doesn't show the new hotel to the north, but this is coming out from about the southwest. So you can see the facility there that's also 3 stories, that's to our southwest, also has close proximity to those homes. And again, this sort of shows kind of the way that this parcel sits. And the circulation that would occur no matter what goes here, you're going to have circulation and activity that would be right up against this development. And so, frankly, just the transition between single-family homes and C2 already introduces a concept that, all things being equal, we'd love for there to be something else transitioning, but such was the zoning that was put in place, that you do have it up against. I think the best-case scenario is to have a quiet use and to have extra buffers built in, which is what we've introduced here. One of the questions that we often get from neighbors, and perhaps you've thought of it, is, well, I see a lot of self-storage facilities. Is there really a market for it? And so we went ahead and did the research on that, maybe to get out in front of a question that might be asked of us, and found that the occupancy rates are very high in this area. And so there is a need for it in this particular area. Now, this is the other question we get. Well, why? Why is that the case? Why are we seeing such an explosion of self-storage? And I thought I can just provide some insight with that. Number one is that you're just getting, frankly, better self-storage facilities than you had before. They're climate controlled oftentimes, they're clean, they have high security, they're in more convenient locations than they were before, and that part of that is because you have this internal structure where they go up instead of being sprawled out. You need a different acreage than you need, and so that allows them to be more in shopping centers close by as opposed to being, oh, I have to drive down a ways. And so you're seeing them more often. The security is much better on them. We know when somebody came, we know what they were doing when they were there, and we know when they left. Usually you have to sort of clock in and clock out. And so there's a much higher level of security, so people feel more comfortable putting their things. And then frankly, the design is just more attractive than the older centers. Also with COVID, you have these spare bedrooms where maybe you stored some stuff and now this become your home office. And so there's a need for you to put some of that into storage. Also, there's a rise of multi-generational households. So you've seen that individuals living in multi-generational housing is about 20%. And you can see the trend line that's shooting upwards. And so that brings in, we have mom and dad that live with us or whatever the case may be. Also in 2022, about 48% of adults ages 18 to 29 were living with one or both of their parents. So as this is a generation that's starting out, they're going to acquire their things as well. And so again, additional need for storage. And then we also have rising home prices, and what that can lead to is either smaller square footages of homes, or it can lead to housing that doesn't have a garage. The reality is that I dare say that most, if not all of us, have storage. A lot of us just do it in our garage. And maybe it's in the third car garage that we don't use, or maybe it's in a portion of the garage that still allows the vehicle in, but we all have storage. And so for folks who are getting into housing that maybe they don't have their own storage unit, their own garage, that also creates a need. As we see the cost of housing go up, it also creates a need to adapt to that, and so this can be one of the consequences. And then small businesses use them. I'm a small law firm. I have to have my storage. It costs me a lot more to have it in my higher price downtown Phoenix office than it is to have it in a storage. And so I have off-site storage for a lot of my files. The small businesses do the same. Now, as was mentioned, again, these are some of the uses that are allowed by right in C2, and I think that you would see, as you look through this list, a lot more activity and a lot more of a negative to neighbors right up against these types of uses. Again, one of the questions that I ask myself is, well, why is an SUP even required? If those uses are allowed by right, why would we ask for an SUP for a storage use? And I think a lot of this is based off of old zoning codes back before some of these upgrades were made, where we would think of storage and think of a facility like this, barbed wire, people had concerns. But I can tell you that, for example, and of course that's now sort of old, we've talked about the upgrades that are existing today. I can tell you that Scottsdale, for example, they removed their requirement for their CUP, and now it's allowed by right when you have an internal storage facility like we're doing here. And that was something that they went through and made a text amendment and removed. And so it's a little bit, in my opinion, a little bit of an oddity that there even is an SUP requirement when you look at what's allowed by right and why is a storage facility. But again, it's sort of based off of what I think is an old code and old concerns. I won't dwell on this because I think it's been well articulated that we're putting in an internal buffer. So when you combine the fact that we are incredibly quiet, and what happens is people put stuff in storage, they don't come back very often. And so one of the things we brag about when we do storage cases is it's one of the lowest commercial traffic generators you can find, and it's well accepted in the industry. They're also very quiet for the similar reason. You don't have constant activity coming through. The other thing is that with regard to what was mentioned with the windows, anything that would go here that would be a hotel, or if you did have an office, it could be 2 stories. Frankly, if you ask me, would you rather have 3-story and no windows or 2-story and windows? I'd rather have the 3-story and no windows because people get very concerned about anybody looking down into them, whether that's a multifamily unit, whether it's an office complex. It's one of the things we hear the most is traffic and are people looking into my backyard. Those are the 2 things in infill development that we hear the most. And here we've addressed really both of those are home runs from the neighbor's perspective. Here's the site plan, happy to come back to it, but I'll highlight what was mentioned earlier, which is that our loading areas are on the north and on the south, and we don't have any type of significant activity happening on the west side. And then, of course, we have that row of trees that we're putting in on the west side as well to mitigate any views that would be seen. And then I'll just mention this also, the light spillage. This is really ordinance requirement, but I highlight it because it's important. It's another thing we hear from neighbors. Well, what about lighting? Well, that's another thing that self-storage doesn't need a significant amount of lighting because people kind of know where they're going. We're not trying to light up our signage so that, you know, all of our customers coming in for their late night, you know, hotel stay or their late night this or that. And so they can remain fairly low lighting. We just need to have enough for security, but that we can keep the lighting low. The stipulation that was mentioned, that works just fine for us. And so here you see that this photometric plan shows that we're not having any of that lighting spill over to the west. So again, this is why we think they are a great neighbor. I don't know that that's why for sure. I can speculate that we saw this coming in thinking this would be actually a really great neighbor. And we think it's a great use of a recessed commercial site. So with that, happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any speaker cards?
I've not received any.
Anyone in the audience like to speak on this agenda item? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. I'd like to have a motion and a second. Commissioner Booth has made a motion, Commissioner Wang a second. We have any discussion among the commission members?
No, I think I'm okay.
Okay. Yeah, you know, you talked about the height. The maximum height allowed was 56, although I think it was 48 was the maximum height on that building. So.
I noticed that there are several other 3-story buildings right there. I wasn't aware of the home too, because that was before me. Yeah. So if all the residents knew that and it was already there.
Right.
I mean, he makes an extremely valid point, the low volume of traffic.
Right.
I totally agree with that. I just, if I were going to choose to live there, I would have looked into it like he would have. That was my background.
Yep.
I would have been thinking, oh, that's a big building. But if they didn't have any problem, then yeah.
Okay, let's have a vote.
Commissioner Hegedus?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Open the public hearing. Agenda item number 3 is a use permit for a hospital. Guadalupe Ortiz Cortez will be up speaking for this. Go ahead, Guadalupe.
Hold on. I'm not as tall. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, Guadalupe Ortiz Cortez, planner. The request before you is for a use permit for a medical building. The zoning ordinance requires that a hospital or medical building with overnight care goes through a use permit process. This proposal is for a medical building with overnight care. The subject property is located at the southeast corner of North Litchfield Road and West McDowell Road. The property is zoned PAD, Planned Area Development, and has an underlying C2 general commercial designation. The zoning for the property was approved in 1989. The site is approximately 2.75 acres and is located within the Palm Valley Pavilion's East Center. The property is located south of the Target and Michaels, east of the Shops building, including a Starbucks and Bell Spirits Day School. It is north of the Abrazo West Wound Clinic and west of the Abrazo West, north of the Abrazo West Wound Clinic and west of the Abrazo West Campus Hospital. This is an infill pad. Patients will have access to the medical building from existing entrances to the commercial center from Litchfield Road and McDowell Road. The orange outline shows the approximate area where improvements are proposed. The use permit proposal is for a 46,300 square foot, 2-story building with medical offices and imaging in the first floor and an overnight rehabilitation facility in the second floor. The proposed project provides the required parking spaces and landscape. The medical building will be connected to the adjacent Abrazo West Valley Hospital campus via an existing pedestrian footway and an additional footway that will be constructed with the medical building. The Abrazo Litchfield facility will utilize resources from the Abrazo West Hospital, such as dietary, physician rounding, and interchangeable staff. The medical building does not propose emergency or ambulance services. The proposed building design matches that of other buildings in the center, including stone, stucco, and desert color palette. The west elevation is the front of the building and faces towards Litchfield Road. The east elevation faces the Abrazo West campus. The north elevation faces the loading area of the Michaels, the Target, and the south elevation faces the Abrazo Wound Clinic and parking spaces as well. The application meets the use permit evaluation criteria established in the zoning ordinance. Staff believes the use permit is compatible with the uses permitted in the surrounding area. The proposed use is similar to the other commercial type of uses that are permitted in the property and existing in the Palm Valley Pavilion Center. The Abrazo West Wound Clinic is a similar use and is also located in this center, the Palm Valley Pavilion's East Commercial Center. Other users in the center include the Belle Esprit Day School, Target, Michael's, Red Lion Inn & Suites, and Raul and Teresa's Mexican restaurant, among other users. A traffic study was submitted and reviewed with the use permit application. The traffic study found that the proposed development is not anticipated to cause any detrimental impacts to the surrounding roadway network. The first floor of the medical building, as mentioned previously, is expected to host imaging and medical offices. The first floor will be open from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and from 7 a.m. to 2 p.m. on Saturdays. The second floor, the rehabilitation facility, will be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, with expected visitor hours from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. There will be on-site staff 24/7, 7 days a week. The citizen review and public hearing processes were followed. Notices were mailed to surrounding property owners. A sign was posted on the property, and a legal advertisement was published in the newspaper. In lieu of a neighborhood meeting, considering that there are no residential neighborhoods in the vicinity, an alternative review notice was sent to surrounding property owners. To date, staff has not received any inquiries on the project. The use permit meets the city requirements. Staff recommends the Planning and Zoning Commission forwards a recommendation of approval to the City Council, subject to the stipulations found in the staff report. Mr. Chairman, Commission members, this concludes my presentation. The applicant is in attendance as well.
Any questions for staff?
I'm curious.
Okay, curious tonight. Okay.
They mentioned the imaging, and I know there's imaging to the northeast as well as to the south. Are they planning to consolidate those, or is this in addition to what's already out there in the Abrazo product?
This would be a new product.
So someone besides Simon Med?
Exactly. It'd be in addition to. All imaging is not created equal.
Right.
It would be MRI versus CT
Gotcha.
versus ultrasound.
I've been to both facilities for different reasons, just like that. So
Yeah.
I was just curious if we were going to now have empty medical buildings. So
No, it's
Cool.
a very, very good question.
Yeah, would the applicant like to approach and
Yeah, that'd be
give
great. My name is Jake Dinnan, Executive Vice President of Development at P&B. We're the developer of this facility and also the owner of the Simon Med building. So we don't want an empty building either. So we do a lot of healthcare underwriting in communities like yourself and make sure that we're putting the right care in the right location. And that has been the heart of what this building is. The inpatient rehab facility that's on the second floor is much needed in this market because there is a very big void. They're currently in the Abrazo West Valley campus. We're trying to decant that and put them in the right care setting. That frees up their nurses and staff to create better care, better quality outcomes, and puts those patients that are sick enough to stay in the hospital but not well enough to go home in the right care setting. So if you see on this particular elevation here, if this works, there we go. There's two entrances to this building, and that's purposeful. So the inpatient facility would be entered here on the southwest corner, and then the clinical portions are entered in more of the center corridor here, so you can enter in and go right or left. It makes it a nice patient experience. There's two reasons we do that. One is safety and security, because the upper floor is going to be open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You want to maintain that security. The other reason is it's required by the health department, so to segregate the two inpatient and what we call inpatient and outpatient facilities. And then we can close the outpatient facilities at that 7 p.m. hour, so patients know exactly where they need to go. But,
Thank you.
yeah, very welcome. Any other questions for me?
Any questions for the applicant? Thank you.
Thank you.
Were there any speaker cards?
I have not received any.
Okay, anyone from the audience like to pose a question or make a statement on this agenda item? Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing. I'd like to have a motion and a second. Commissioner Zambito has made a motion. Commissioner Booth has seconded. Any discussion among the commission members? Seeing none, let's vote.
I do have a comment. Sorry.
Okay.
As somebody who had a parent in the rehab portion of Abrazo recently, I do see the need to have a separate facility. So I'm glad to see that's in production.
Good. So, and your vote is?
My vote is aye.
There you go.
Motion passes.
Okay, going to open the public hearing. We have one other agenda item. It's a rezone for stream data centers, and Steve Caracia is going to give us a presentation on that. Hi, Steve.
Good evening, Vice Chair, Commission members. Standing in for Karen Craver, who did the evaluation and all the work associated with this. I'm just delivering the presentation. So tonight it is a rezone from I-1 to I-1 with a PAD overlay, and it is the PAD overlay part that is the main subject of this request. Property we're looking at tonight, this is Litchfield Road here, Lower Buckeye, MC85. It's about 104 acres right here, a data center complex here. To the north, we have existing data center building here. To the east, within the city of Avondale, we have a mix of ag, some scattered home sites, some businesses, zoned industrial, though, within the city of Avondale. To the south, APS substation. And then to the west, we have an existing and proposed Microsoft data center campus right here. Little history, 2006, the property was rezoned from ag to I-1. A year later, 500,000 square foot industrial building was built, though it has remained vacant for several years. Up until about 2019, Stream purchased the building and the remaining, and that 104 acres. May 2023, they had a site plan approved. You're going to see 5 buildings total on the site, data center buildings, about 400,000 square feet, 50 feet in height. And this was the site plan, Lower Buckeye here, north to the top, to the right, I should say, Litchfield Road here. And here you'll have the 5 data center buildings progressing down through the site. And then here's that substation down here that is to the south. And zooming in just on kind of a typical building here, this is Litchfield Road here. So we have the data center building here. You'll have generator yards to the north and south of that building. And then you'll have equipment, chillers on top of the roof. And part of the reason we're going to have the PAD overlay request tonight is because of this equipment on the roof, the need to keep it away from heat and to separate them from each other. And so what we're looking at tonight is with that equipment on the roof, there's a zoning ordinance requirement that all rooftop equipment needs to be screened. And that's in Article 3 in our industrial standards. So moving over to Article 8 of the zoning code, now we start getting into some of the standards that apply to that screening. And so with a max building height of 50 feet, we can allow screening mechanisms, walls, to go up another 10 feet. So up to 60 feet total. However, there's a limitation in Article 8 that 10-foot screening wall can only be 50% of the building length and a max of 50% of the roof area. So you can have that extra 10 feet, but there's a limit on how much you can have. But with the equipment and technology that Stream needs to use, there's a need for additional chillers on the roof. So the applicant was looking at potentially needing up to 90%, let's say, of the building roof area needing to be screened. And looking at that request, what this would do would allow for the necessary screening if we were to adjust our 50% requirement. And I should note that this PAD overlay request, very limited in scope. This is just for the screening, those regulations in Article 8. There's no other change to this request to the site, to the rezoning, to the uses. It is just addressing the screening and the city's zoning ordinance limitation that it's capped at 50%. So what the request would do would be, this is looking at the long side of the building. We would have those air-cooled chillers on the roof, and the potential that we could now have, instead of just half the building, now you would have that screen wall running pretty much the whole length of the building. And the applicant is proposing this screen wall with an architectural enhancement. They have the louvers here, also metal panels, so they'll mix up the materials and the look of that screen wall. So even though there's a limited scope to this PAD overlay, we did have to follow all of our public hearing requirements, that including a citizen review mailer to all surrounding property owners within 500 feet, as well as notice for this public hearing before the Commission and Council, a legal ad, again, another postcard mailing, as well as a posting of the property. To date, staff has not received any inquiries on this request. So in looking at this request for PAD overlay to increase the maximum allowance for the screening, we find the request would allow the applicant to use the necessary technology that they need for their operations and also provide adequate screening. What that does is it reduces the impact of that equipment on neighboring properties and the public. And again, this request is just for the screening on top of the roof. There's no change to the uses or development standards. So in looking at all that, we found that it does meet the criteria for a PAD overlay consistent with the general plan, the industrial land use that is on the property, as well as it's compatible with the surrounding area in terms of the other industrial uses in the area. As such, our recommendation is for approval, and if recommended tonight, the next hearing would be July 10th before the City Council at 5 p.m. Mr. Vice Chair, that does conclude my presentation. Available for questions. The applicant is also here, available for questions, and also a presentation if you would so like to see it.
Questions for Steve? I just had, go ahead.
I'm probably overthinking it, but because we're doing the special overlay, that would prevent us setting a precedent for someone else asking, unless it's in a similar circumstance, which I see the value of having the screening there. Is that Because that would give us in the future, if someone came, we could say, no, we don't like this particular use. Here I see the value.
Commissioners, that's a good question. Yes, because we're going through this public hearing process and evaluation, looking at the specific merits of this project, we would not be setting precedent. This does not allow then everybody else now to have this screening.
Okay, thank you.
Well, that was my question, and it would be someone else coming up with a similar type of building. They did it, we want to do it, so it's okay, isn't it? So, I don't know how many more of these. I can see a lot of these in our future for some reason. These data buildings. So that's my question. So anyway, anything else for Steve? Okay. Would the applicant like to speak?
Thank you, and while they're pulling this up, good evening, Mr. Vice Chair, Commissioners, staff. I'm Andrew Yancey with the law firm Bergen, Frank, Smalley, and Oberholzer. We do represent Stream Data Center, the applicant here. They're a nationwide data center developer, and they own over 100 acres at the southwest corner of Lower Buckeye Road and Litchfield Road. And their intent here is to develop this into a multi-building data campus. There would be over $1 billion invested in this area. As Steve mentioned, but it's just kind of worth noting again, this is a very, very limited request. The I-1 uses remain the same. The I-1 development standards stay the same. We already have site plan approval according to all those I-1 uses and standards. This is just about the rooftop screening, and to the Vice Chair's point earlier, this does just apply to our property. We're showing that we're proving it up for our property in particular, and just kind of to walk through why that is. Why are we here for just a PAD overlay for screening? And I do want to note too, we're asking to be allowed to do more screening, not less screening. The data centers, they produce a lot of heat. They've got a lot of equipment. It produces a lot of heat. You got to find a way to cool that. There's a couple ways to do that. One of them is a water-based method that uses a lot of water. It's very water intensive. We don't want to do that. We're using a closed-loop air chiller system. So part of the way that works is the closed loop is the coolant just stays within the loop. The other component of it is the air is exchanged. The hot air from within the building goes out into the atmosphere, and it brings in air from the outside, pushes it through the coolant, pushes it out into the building to cool it down. Now, there's the basic law of physics that heat rises. So if we want to take that hot air from out of our building and push it out, it makes the most sense to have that equipment up on the rooftop so the hot air can go up there. And then once it goes out, it dissipates. The wind blows it away. There's no building blocking it. It goes out into the air. The other good thing about it is we can space the chillers out farther from each other. Because they're producing heat, we don't want them too close to each other because they can overheat each other. The roof is an area where there's a lot of space that would otherwise be unused that we can do that. As Steve mentioned, we run into this code issue where only 50% of the rooftop or of an elevation can be screened. And what we're asking is just to eliminate that cap so that we can put the chillers on the roof and we can screen them from everyone else's view. I really appreciate staff's work on this, Karen for bringing it forward. Steve's presentation tonight really hit on a lot of points. I'm just going to skip over a couple slides. Really, what I'd like to show you is our elevations. And Steve showed you some, but I've got a couple more here. Oh, I'm sorry, the one other thing I do just want to hit. This is the language in the code that we're amending. And you can see we're not adding anything new. We're just striking out that cap at 50%. The code limits the screening to no more than 10 feet high. We're not asking to change the height. We're keeping it at the 10 feet. That's not going to change. So this right here is sort of the 3D render of what we're looking at. it's an industrial building. It houses a data center, but you can see there's really more of a modern aesthetic. There's color variation, painted tilt-up concrete. There's vertical and horizontal steel elements and some glazed windows. Again, this has already been approved through the design review process with the site plan. This is the same image. We're just highlighting for you where the screening is. We think it really integrates well with the overall design of the building. There's going to be color matched. It's integrated into the design. There are some vertical elements breaking it up where there are some of the longer components there. And we just really think it doesn't necessarily look like a different piece of the building. It's really integrated in. So that's what I wanted to show you here today. So that's really everything I have to add to what Steve's already said, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have as well.
Questions? Okay, thank you. Are there any speaker cards?
I have not received any.
Okay, anyone in the audience like to speak? Kathleen, I see you sitting over there. Hi. Okay. All right, we're going to close the public hearing. I'd like to have a motion and a second. Commissioner Booth has made motions, and Commissioner Sambedo has seconded. Any commission would like to make a comment? No comments? Please vote.
Commissioner Hegedus?
Aye.
Motion passes.
Okay, thank you. Are there any staff communications?
So unfortunately, we're missing quite a few staff members tonight.
Okay.
So I don't have the regular staff communications that like Katie or Christopher would normally do. But I just want to let you know that the next meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission is all the way in August, and we actually won't be in council chambers. We will be at City Hall, but we will be in the Canyon Trails conference rooms due to their remodeling of this of council chambers and actually installing the permanent equipment that we'll need. So that's all I have.
Okay. I can tell you ahead of time, I won't be there. I'll be in Africa, so hopefully I'll make it back from there.
Okay.
Okay. The meeting is adjourned. I will see you in September.